Good morning, everyone. Happy to see all of you here for this webinar about our collaboration between the Solar Impulse Foundation and Climate Dividends. I see that we're starting late, so I think we can start already. So, can you all see my screen? Perfect. So yeah, happy to welcome you for this collaboration presentation. Today, Laura and I are hosting this session, and we welcome Antoine and Jeremy from Accenta and Serena, who will bring their testimonies on how it is to collaborate with the Solar Impulse Foundation and Climate Dividends, and how, as an innovator or an investor, you can engage with both organizations and both frameworks. So the agenda for today will start with a quick introduction about the climate dividends and the Solar Impulse Foundation and what we do separately. Then we'll quickly present our partnership, and we'll then go to have the testimonies from Jeremy and Antoine before leaving some time to Q&As and conclude the session. So to start, let me start presenting the Solar Impulse Foundation and the Efficient Solution label. I'll be quick on this. So our role at the Solar Impulse Foundation is to unleash the potential of efficiency for a better world. Efficiency, according to some studies, can represent up to 40% of the decarbonization effort. So for us, it's key to make sure that we use the energy, the resources, and everything efficiently to make sure that we can transition and lower our footprint on the environment. We do that through by sourcing, assessing, and accelerating efficient solutions. I'll start with the acceleration, and we'll go back to the sourcing and assessing later. What we do to accelerate these solutions. So first, we raise awareness. So our first pillar is to inform citizens to make them aware of the opportunities that are derived from the efficient solution, and we really want the common citizens to believe in the transition and trust that there is a lot of opportunities in transitioning towards a more sustainable society. We do that with expositions. So we have the City of Tomorrow, who's now in Brussels in Belgium, where we showcase solutions, concrete examples of implementation to inform citizens. We then have a second pillar where we aim to transform markets. So we entrust businesses and public leaders to use their decision-making power for the benefit of the environment and the economy. We do that through matchmaking between potential adopters and solution providers, but also through call to solutions and events where we connect the different people from a network. Then we have this pillar that is all about mobilizing finance. So making sure that these solutions, these technologies, they have sufficient capital to develop the impact they're willing to make on the world. We do that through matchmaking again. We are working and collaborating with 2 partner funds to make this lens. And again, we organize investment dedicated events. Then our last pillar is really about advocacy. And for this, we use the voice of our founder and chairman, Bertrand Piccard, to go to politics and make sure that we can create the right frameworks and the right conditions for these solutions to bloom and to be implemented efficiently. Looking at our ecosystem, we've now identified more than 1,500 solutions that are labeled, and we've identified more than 1,800. So we have quite a lot of potential. Our network is about 4,000 members. We have about 400 experts that are assessing solutions. I'll come back to that later. We have 100 collaboration, and so far our partner funds have raised 320 million to finance labeled companies. We engage with innovation clusters, industry and private sectors, investors, governments and cities, and NGO and foundations. Coming back to the identification part and how we identify these solutions, these clean tech, these pioneers, innovators, we use what we call the Solar Impulse Efficient Solution label. The Solar Impulse Efficient label aims to be a trademark that is focused on both environmental and economical viability. So this is a label that seeks to identify these technologies, products, services that bring together the protection of the environment and the profitability for the clients, demonstrating that there is a real opportunity in making the transition. As I was mentioning, we've identified 1,500 solutions. With the label, we bring 6 benefits. So access to market, access to capital, credibility, visibility for the solutions, environmental advocacy through the voice of Bertrand Piccard and our actions towards politics. And we also have e-academies to bring and to talk about the best practices from industry experts. The label is free, and we use a process that is focusing on 3 criteria: the feasibility, the environmental impact, and the client economic incentive. And for this process, we use a community of experts. So for each candidate and each candidacy, we will assign 3 independent experts that will review these 3 criteria and make their decision on if the solution deserves to be awarded with the label or not. These experts, so we count more than 390 experts. 120 of them are PhD holders, and we have 50 nationalities within our community. Looking at the environmental impact, the way we look at it is through a comparative analysis, where we compare the impact of the solution against what we call the mainstream alternative, so what it is replacing, through the different stages of the life cycle. So we compare the production, distribution, use, and end-of-life phase. And based on this, we make a decision on the positive impact or not of the solutions. Through this comparative analysis, we aim to look at 5 different types of impacts. So we look at climate change, human health, ecosystems, natural resources, and water consumption. So this is in short what the Solar Impulse Foundation is doing. The label, happy to provide more information during the Q&A, and I'll leave the floor to Laura to present the climate dividends and the framework.
Thanks a lot, Robin, and hi everyone. Very happy to be here today. So I'm the CEO of a non-for-profit called Climate Dividend, and the idea here is to tell you a little bit more about how it works so that you can then understand the collaboration that we've built between the 2 initiatives. So if we start and get into what are climate dividends, it's something very obvious, I imagine, for many of you, but I like to start from the basic to make sure that we all talk about the same thing, is that in terms of climate and GHG emissions, we know that we need to reduce them globally. And for that, there's 2 things that we need to do. We need more sufficiency, energy, service, materials, so we need less consume things. But we also need what we call climate solutions, but kind of similar to what the Solar Impulse Foundation's called efficient solutions. We need things that will enable us, the humanity, to keep doing things that we want to keep doing, such as transporting ourselves, feeding ourselves, heating ourselves, or cooling, depending on the situation, but to do those kind of things in a much more efficient way in terms of GHG emissions. And for those climate solutions to happen, we need massive investments for them. However, next slide, please. We don't have enough of those investments for many reasons, but one of them is that, next slide, the approach that today we have on impact is very often only based on the negative impact. So if we take a very concrete example of someone who's doing thermal renovation, for example, and providing a heat pump, so something quite simple so that everyone can understand. Well, if you produce that heat pump, you're of course going to emit GHG emission. Your heat pump is made out of something. You needed to produce it. And of course, you need to try to reduce or at least optimize this emissions. However, every time that you sell this heat pump, you're replacing or you're enabling your customer to reduce their own carbon footprint. So it's kind of the same idea, not kind, it's exactly the same idea as what Robin just described in comparing to what's the alternative solution. What would have happened in your customer's house or process or factory if they hadn't been using your heat pump? Well, in most cases here, they would be using something that is more polluting, more emitting, coal, gas, or whatever. And so it's this difference, this positive contribution that we called avoided or removed emission. Sometimes people refer to the word scope 4, which is not formalized, but just if for some of you it rings a bell. And so this positive contribution today is really not looked, next slide, please, Robin, this. The fact that we only look on induced emission means that we really ignore the sort of positive contribution of those climate solutions, and thus that we struggle to value them. And this is the case both for climate solutions and for investors. When you're a solution that does only this, so is an efficient solution, it's really kind of unfair if we're only talking about your carbon footprint, because yes, you're polluting, but you're doing so much more. But today it's difficult to value it. And on the other hand, for investors, well, and Jeremy will be maybe able to mention it, but it's also very difficult to actually select companies based on that positive contribution. They don't really know how to do it, and they're not incentivized for this. So this is one of the reasons why we're really lacking investments in those kind of solutions. And this is what we are really tackling with climate dividends. We need a sort of more standardized and measure to incentivize it. Next. And so thanks. Climate dividends is really this. It's an extra financial information that's going to correspond to that positive climate contribution. So for every ton of CO2 avoided or removed by a company, they're going to be able to distribute one climate dividend to their shareholder. If we get just a tiny bit more concrete so that you get a better idea, how does it work? So if we take my example, I keep with my example of the heat pump company. What does it mean for them? The first step is they check that they're eligible. First, one of the things is that if you're a small company, you need to have done, for example, your carbon footprint. The idea is I'm not going to talk about what I do good if I'm not aware of what I do bad. Both are important. They need it. Once you're eligible, then you're going to really actually measure this positive contribution. On this, we provide companies with a protocol, which is a methodology of how to assess this in a very quite precise and standardized way. And then we also have sort of sectorial cookbooks, sectorial use case of, okay, what does it concretely mean for the heat pump company? And so you can use this to actually assess your impact and then get a figure that says, this year I've avoided 10,000 tons of CO2, for example, thanks to the sales of my heat pump. And you formalize this in a document, and it doesn't really matter the name. This is then verified by a third independent party, which is not us, but which is someone that we bring. And then if everything is all right, this enables to convert this verified emissions into climate dividends, one ton, one climate dividend. So in my example, the heat pump company will have 10,000 climate dividends issued, and then they can distribute them to the shareholders at the pro rata of detention of capital. So if an investor's got 40% of my heat pump company, they'll get 4,000 climate dividends. So this is how it works. And it has two main value added, two main use cases. Next slide, please. Oh, forgot that one. Just very quickly, it's very useful because, I mean, it's very interesting to see it as a mirror of a financial dividend for climate. When you're a company that succeeds climately, you'll be able to distribute financial dividends to your shareholder. When you're a company that succeeds climately, like we've just explained, well, today you had nothing. And here you can see on the top level of the figure that the climate dividends come really as a sort of link between the company's results, if what they sell is a heat pump, yes, they make money, yes, they avoid emission, but if they want to circle this back to their investor, well, for finance, they got financial dividends. For climate, now they got climate dividends. Next slide, please. And so it has, as I was going to say, two main value added for both investors and companies. The first one is the standardization. So the idea is that it enables to talk about the same thing when we talk about climate positive contribution. It's very important to state that it's something that comes in addition of negative impact assessment. It's not an offsetting tool or compensation on any kind, but it's something that values what you do positively in addition of the negative. And this standardization comes from the protocol, the third-party verification, and the transparency. And that's very useful just to have something even more easier to integrate in your operation or in your selection. And the second one is this sort of investment traceability in financial valuation that can come to it. The climate dividend provides a very traceable and easy link between that impact and an equity investment. And what I like to say is that if I'm someone who doesn't know anything about the heat pump sector or anything about finance, if that company distributes financial dividends to me, I know that they are distributing financial dividends to their shareholders. I know that this is a positive economic signal. I don't need to be an expert to know this. The idea of climate dividends is exactly the same, is that you can have a sort of much more vulgarized term that even if you're not an avoided emission expert, which is a quite complicated topic, you can know and you can trust that this is a positive metric. And because it mimics so much the financial dividends mechanism, you can use it much more easily in financial processes. So we've got, for example, ratios like you're invested vs climate dividends, or revenues vs climate dividends, or carbon footprint vs climate dividends. And all of these ratios can be integrated into the due diligence processes, in the reporting process, in operational strategic monitoring things. And the end goal is to integrate it into the financial valuation of companies. The idea for this, and this is going to be the little accounting moment, not just one moment, and I'm almost done, Robin, is to help value what we can call a climate goodwill. So in accounting, a goodwill is something that is an intangible asset, but that has value. The best example of a goodwill is the brand. If you're going to buy Tesla's shares, Tesla's equity, you're going to pay for Tesla's brand. I'm probably sure that everyone here will agree. But how much will you pay for that brand? That's debatable. Maybe I'll be willing to pay more than Robin because, I don't know, I love cars or I have synergies there, whatever. But I still need to sort of come out with a method to do so. And so we can use this sort of notion of goodwill for climate, which is to say that everything equal, more and more investors are willing to pay more for a company that has a positive climate impact and other impacts actually, but here we're just focused on climate. But because this is so difficult to assess, to apprehend, and because as an investor, you don't want to be the only one paying for it, because otherwise this is not a goodwill, this is being screwed, and you just paid too much for something that no one pays for. Well, no one is actually paying for that climate goodwill. So here, the idea is that the ability of distributing climate dividends is one way of making this much more easy to quantify and put a financial value on it. And you can go to the next slide. Our ambition is really to make climate dividends one of the main indicators and mechanism that's going to be used internationally, both by regulatory standards, but also by the market to really help value climate solution and incentivize investments toward them. Next slide. Please. We launched the initiative, so a bit more recent, early 2023, and we did 2 years of pilot phase now, with more than 30 companies that already participated and that have distributed to more than 100 investors. You can see very quickly with the logos, it goes from very small startups to big company in a very wide range of sectors, not in different countries, in Canada and several countries in Europe. And the idea is really to make it more and more used so that the comparison standard is even better. Next slide, please. And yes, so that's, I wasn't sure whether I finished.
Yes.
Just to finish and to wrap up. So climate dividends is both something, it's a new mechanism, but it's very simple in a way of, okay, let's look at what we do positively and make it more tangible for investors. And it relies on, this methodological part and the whole growing community that is around. And I'm done.
So now about the collaboration and why and how we will put that in place. First on the why, we've been in touch with Laura for quite a few months now, and when we first had this discussion about impact and how we could work together, we actually realized that we had the same values and belief. We, as organizations, we both value collaboration and innovation, and we both believe that impact can return financial value. So having an impact, positive impact, can derive financial value. We both believe that we need a strong impact accounting system, and that this impact accounting system needs to put forward these companies and these activities that are generating this positive impact. And we actually came to the conclusion that we needed synergies between the different impact framework. When you look at what we are doing as the Solar Impulse Foundation and the climate dividends, we use similar methodologies. We look at what are the emissions linked to the companies and the ones that they can reduce or avoid. And we both have the same ambition to value these avoided emissions. We also realized that we had the same impact approach. Both organizations are applying the life cycle analysis principles, where we use standardized and widely available data. We both believe that transparency is key in evaluating the impact, to make sure that the framework, they are well understood by the different stakeholders, investors, clients, adopters, and the regulation makers. And we also believe that it is quite important to involve third party to review this impact and ensure that this is objective and that there is no bias in the impact evaluation. So we came with at the end of this first call with an alignment on our DNA and our common values, and decided we needed to do something together. And so we're starting this collaboration with a very concrete step, and I'll let Laura explain what is this first step.
Okay. Just maybe just adding, before getting into what's this first step, adding something to what just Robin said, is one of the things that we also shared was, okay, it's very cool that more and more things exist to help assess and value efficient, innovative climate or transition solutions. But we also know and want to make sure that these things are consistent with one another, and that we're not just adding layers and layers of work, of additional things for shareholders and for stakeholders, that are already doing well what we should all be doing. And so not just creating, reporting layers and things. And we're like, okay, how can we maximize the value that we bring to all of those people that we ultimately both want to support, without, just creating additional work just for the sake of additional work. And so based on what just Robin said, and this, we thought of two very concrete things. The first one is for solutions, is the climate dividends approach, as you might have seen, is a little bit more precise than what the overall approach of the Solar Impulse does, because they're broader and very interesting. And so, but it's very aligned in the philosophy, and what they actually want to see is whether you have a climate positive contribution. And so what happens now is that you can use directly the climate dividends claim that you've done to fill in the environmental section of the Solar Impulse application. So you don't need to refill in something for that part. There's other parts in the Solar Impulse that are not environment, so that you still have to do, of course, because that's a very different topic. So we can't just put all together, but you can save a lot of time and value even more what you've done in the climate dividends and get access more easily to the Solar Impulse application. So this really makes a lot of sense. We thought that made a lot of sense for us to encourage companies to value and take more advantage of both our initiatives. In medium term, we really want to look at whether there's other kind of equivalency that we can find and really make those things echo in the best ways possible to make it both efficient in terms of filling and still very robust in terms of application. For investors, it's a little bit different right now, but we really believe that there's a very interesting kind of global approach of, okay, the Solar Impulse level is a sort of very cool way of screening impact solution, kind of fueling in and sourcing it, because when you just want to see, okay, where can I invest, in which direction should I go, if you can't ask all your companies in due diligence to have already done climate dividends. Not yet. Hopefully one day, maybe, once they will have all done it, but it's not yet. So the Solar Impulse is a really cool way of having a first but very solid way of saying, okay, these are good solutions that I want to assess. And then you can use climate dividends to actually, okay, report, monitor, and value that impact once you've decided that you invested, once you're accompanying this company, when you want to do the exit, etc. And this is also time safe to assess the impact, and it also enables to have a sort of much more integrated way of putting impact in the investment from the screening to then the reporting and then to the exit. And so we thought that also this made a lot of sense in the way the process, but many other more concrete things are going to be able to maybe be built upon this. But because we work also with entrepreneurs and that's what we are, we thought, okay, better to start with something very concrete, very applicable, and then we'll build upon. And so we were also very open to any suggestions, both from solutions and investors, on what other links, what other equivalency we can build and do that would create even more value for all of us to get to the direction of we want more solutions, more valued with a more measured impact, more finance, and that's all that we want for hopefully more transition.
It's time for the users' feedback and time to ask some questions to Jeremy and Antoine. But before we do that, we would like to give you some time to get to know Jeremy and Antoine and what they're doing at Serena and Accenta. So maybe Antoine, if you can take 2 minutes to present yourself and your role in Accenta and what Accenta is doing.
Yes. Hi, everybody. My name is Antoine. I'm Chief Financial and Impact Officer at Accenta. Accenta is a startup that is providing solutions to decarbonize heating and cooling system for buildings. So we do that through energy management system to reduce the consumption, and we do that through a thermal system based on geothermal energy and geostorage. So we use the soil to store energy to improve the performance of the heating and cooling system, and we decarbonize up to 90% of the existing system based on gas mainly.
Thanks, Antoine, for this presentation. Jeremy, I'll leave the floor to you for your presentation.
Thanks. Hi, everyone. I'm Jeremy, Head of Sustainability at Serena. Serena is one of Europe's leading venture capital funds. We have close to 1 billion euros under management, about 35 people in the team. In terms of industry, we focus on AI, SaaS, climate tech, impact. And we have invested in more than 100 startups for the past 15 years, from seed to Series A, mainly early stage in France, in Europe, with tickets ranging from 100K euros to 15 million euros. And we started backing decarbonizing solutions in 2019 with Accenta, and I've since doubled down on this climate solutions field with many other investments, a climate tech fund to scale companies that create breakthrough solutions to address the challenges of climate change, both reduction of emissions, but also adaptations. And on my end, I work with all teams at Serena to define and implement our sustainability strategy with our two priorities that are climate and diversity and inclusion.
Thanks, Jeremy and Antoine. Maybe a first question for you both, and feel free to start, Jeremy. What is the main value you see in each of our initiative, and how do you value that? How do you interact with our initiatives as an investor?
First, maybe for a bit of context, probably everyone has seen that for the past few years, past couple of years, the VC funds have really increased their support to climate startups. We're quite far from the investment and money we need to address the challenges in front of us, but still there's been quite an acceleration. You may have seen some huge rounds, such as Accenta last year, raising 100 million, Electra 300 million, so both of them in Serena's portfolio. But with this new focus on climate tech comes the risk of investing in solutions that do not deliver their promises, that claim significant avoided or removed emission, or just greenwashing. So to us, both the Solar Impulse Foundation and Climate Dividends have a huge added value to assess the real impact of climate solutions, to create trust and transparency. So yes, it saves us a bit of time, whether it is prior to the investments to do our due diligence or then to report. But at the end of the day, it's mostly just making sure we invest in real solutions that have a tangible impact, and not just to put lots and lots of money in things that will just be smoke and have no actual change. So yeah, it's mostly helping us do our job better and redirecting the capital to the best solutions and to the entrepreneurs that are actually doing things right.
Thanks a lot for this. What about you, Antoine, as an innovator and a pioneer in decarbonizing the heat in buildings? What is the main value provided by our initiatives for you?
It's already a few years we are part of the label Solar Impulse, and 2 years that we are declaring climate dividends. I think the value from yesterday, from the beginning of our journey, was really about the methodology. At the time, we were really looking for a way to not do greenwashing, to declare our positive contribution through something that was not debatable scientifically. And at that time, the methodology brought by the climate dividend really helped us to be very strict on the criteria we used, and to have a number that is commonly accepted in the company and outside. I think the value for today is really about external and internal communication. External because really we communicate on this initiative and start to gain traction, and plus the Solar Impulse label that is now well known. So it really help us to prove our contribution, and internally, really for our teams, it's really important. It's not something that they are waiting every year, like how many climate dividends we're gonna distribute. So this really something that prove its value, and the value for the future is a little bit what Laura said, and having this possible climate goodwill It will not come next year, but I hope in 10 years, 5 years, okay, in 5 years, really in the fundraising and all the assessment, this will be a criteria that will be looked at and really something that will drive the green investment.
If I can just come back on what Antoine said, because and Jeremy, it's quite interesting to see that this is one of the use case that we hear a lot of people coming, at least to climate dividends. Robin, I'll let you, of course, intervene if it's slightly different for Solar Impulse, but is people that build projects or investment funds with this really strong desire to actually have a positive impact, but we're either kind of depressed is a little bit too much, but demoralized by the fact that they were struggling to actually prove it in a very concrete way, or afraid of doing greenwashing. So we really have this, and we have this with, I don't know, another company that does bikes in cities, or, where all the team, everyone is this, and we really help here give a lot more transparency in this. And I think this is something that maybe we didn't stress out sufficiently, is the transparency approach that is not always easy, because it means, yes, being transparent on things and maybe sometimes having a lesser impact that you thought you'd would, or things like this. But it's so much more powerful if we want to advocate for the cause of impact, but also, and I see it very often in the teams, we see people that are very proud of, participating in it, feel much more confident in what their, management is going to say, because they can also go check it out and understand it. So I think there's also, yes, a very interesting thing here. And on the testimony of, the engagement of the team, we also had, I don't know, Antoine, if it will resonate, but someone from the building sector who's telling us, Philippe Banquet from Ecorus, that he was very surprised to see that for once, something that was ESG, but was positively perceived, but because the idea was, okay, here we're going to say something positive. It doesn't mean it erases what must be optimized, but we positively assessing, and so it's much more encouraging for the teams, rather than just saying, oh, okay, how are we going to reduce the cost or the carbon? Here is how we're going to maximize the value that we're adding, economic or climate. And it's much more exciting just for human beings, I think. So yes, just a little kind of echoing what Antoine said on that point.
Thanks, Laura. I think on the Solar Impulse side, what we see usually when we engage with companies and applicants, we see that what we're doing brings this, for some applicants, bring this reflection about how do I measure my impact. And I think that the Solar Impulse label can start this reflection, but then when you're measuring your impact, it can be quite time consuming. I think that having a way to valorize it and to valorize the measurements through the climate dividend is quite interesting. And as Antoine said, I think it's quite a nice way to, and really clear way to showcase the impact on climate, the activities of the companies they can have. Maybe another question for you, Antoine and Jeremy. So we've unveiled the start of this collaboration. Our aim is to build synergies between the climate dividends and the Solar Impulse Foundation. How do you perceive these synergies, and what would you be looking at in the future if we have to develop other activities together with climate dividends?
Yeah, maybe I can start. So one of the hurdles of any small company like Accenta is to comply with all kind of reportings or all kind of calculations that are maybe not core to the day-to-day business, right? And when you have 3, 4, 5 reportings, because you have 3, 4, 5 investors with different templates and different methodology, is very complicated. So to be able from one methodology to use for other initiative, I think it's a very great point, very practical point that will save time. And then the second one is really about the communication. We know that we need to publicize all the initiative related to climate, and so this kind of collaboration can only help to spread the word and to make both initiatives bigger, and that's a good thing.
Thanks, Antoine.
Maybe I will talk about first sourcing, and then once again the notion of methodology. One of our challenges is to make sure we identify as many climate tech startups as possible in our deal flow, to then direct our capital to the best ones, the ones that would have the wider impact, the solutions that are maybe the most scalable. And since we started investing as a VC fund in climate tech 5 years ago, we do have some kind of recognition on the market and have some climate tech deal flow, but the Solar Impulse Foundation has maybe a wider international community that will bring additional startups into our mirror, and also help ease all the assessment prior to the investment, as we mentioned. So basically, the synergy is that the Solar Impulse Foundation is going to be a first step to have some kind of maybe lighter LCA approach. It's still reviewed by expert. There's still a methodology that's quite robust, but it's maybe easier for seed startups to go through that process, and that will help us for our funds that invest at the earlier stages. And then we're trying to push all our portfolio in climate solutions to go through the climate dividends process to increase the reliability of their calculation, to formalize it even more, and to report that every year, and to make it more and more a natural process in the way they do things, as in the same way they do their financial reporting every year. So I see them in like different stages in a startup's maturity, also the product's maturity. It's easier to start as early as possible, and Solar Impulse Foundation assessment is probably the best way to start.
Thanks, Jérémy. And looking at the time, maybe a last question for you two. What type of advice would you give to the people aspiring to join our communities, so the Solar Impulse and Climate Dividend communities? Yeah, what are the advices? Any advice or words for these people?
My advice would be, don't hesitate. If you want to raise funds from top tier climate tech funds, you will be expected to prove that the positive impact you're claiming is substantiated, that it's not just an hypothesis on the back of an envelope. And so depending on your product's development, your company's maturity, maybe one community might be more relevant than the other, but both of them will help you gain credibility, attract the best investors, and deliver real lasting impact. And if you can do both, such as Accenta, even better.
Yeah, I have the same advice, do both, it's better. And what I just want to mention also is with both initiative, both have an entrepreneur mindset. I mean, what has been achieved in such a short time, and I've been more involved with the climate dividend, but from the original idea to today, the way it is now one of the standard in France, and I hope very soon abroad, it's amazing. A few weeks ago, it's the director of ADEME in France that just made a video about climate dividend. So it's really a startup mindset, and it's very easy to interact with the teams, and this made it kind of easy, even if it's not that easy, because the protocol is hard work, but it makes it very easy to invest time, and now that there is the traction, my first board 2 years ago, people were kind of doubtful. What are you doing? Should we invest time? Today there is no doubt anymore. So yeah, go for it.
Thanks a lot to
We're
both
not
of you.
paying them for it because it really is like it's a little.
Yeah.
I just no, but it's very just one thing that I wanted to say is that I think for both initiatives, it's pioneering initiatives. So of course it always is part of a risk of, spending time, making the effort of understanding, of finding out the right word, the right communication around it. And that's for sure, and we're not denying it. But once you've said there's two things. Our work, and this is really the aim of that collaboration, is how do we minimize as maximum, it will always exist, this effort so that it's pain-free is a little bit too much, but it's just as little pain as possible for the maximum. And how do we get the maximum value out of it? So we're trying to really minimize the effort and maximize the value. The more we will be into it altogether, the more value will come, but also the less effort because more methodologies will be available. We'll both gain more, sort of user feedback, so that will enable us to be even better in accompanying you and helping you finding the right way of doing things. So it really is a sort of, the more we are, the better and the easier it is for everyone. So really, it's a collective bet that we have to take, but I think it's a good one to do. And as this sort of entrepreneurial thing, the sooner you get into the initiative, the more impactful you can be into it. And you can give your opinion, you can make it evolve, because these are also entrepreneurial things where we try to test and learn. So come and test and learn with us so that we can maximize the value that we bring to you. And that's my very silly argument, but hopefully it makes sense.
Thanks, Laura.
Should we open up for questions? I see.
Yeah, exactly. We have time for some questions. Any questions in the audience?
I can see, Robin, that there's already one on climate dividends, and if that's okay, I can maybe take it. Which is, if the application of the solution delivers avoided emission for the user, how can the provider of the solution account that the climate dividends, the CO2 credits, will be claimed by the user of the solution? So getting back into this, not 100% sure that I understood, but I think I did, so I'll try. And Thomas, you do let me know if I'm completely not answering your question. First thing is to understand very clearly this, coming back on what are avoided emissions. When you sell the heat pump, you enable your customer, for example, a brick producer. We can send you the little, we did a little illustration to explain this. But for example, you've got a brick producer that needs to heat his bricks to produce them. Currently, he's using gas. If a solution provider comes and sells a heat pump to him, he can then replace his gas by the heat pump and reduce his own consumption. So he'll have a carbon footprint reduction, that's for sure. But he can account it in his scope 3 or scope 2, depending on what's the activity thing. And that's good for him, and that's okay. What we, both the Solar Impulse Foundation and Climate Dividends, wants to look at is the solution provider. How do we incentivize this guy, the guy who sold the heat pump? And so he enables the emission reduction, but that's what we call avoided emission. He contributed to avoid emission because he enabled them to reduce the customer, to reduce their emission. So that's just one thing. And the solution provider measure his impact and then distribute climate dividends to the shareholders of his company, to his equity investors, not to the customer or not to the others. Thanks so much, Thibault, for sending this. So that's the first thing that I maybe wasn't 100% sure in the question. The second thing is the CO2 credit. So I imagine this is carbon credits. Can you, Robin, come back to my figure, the slide with the mirror of the financial dividend? Because I think that's a useful thing.
I think this is the one, right?
Yeah, that one. Antoine, that's your favorite, the figure for you. So carbon credits and climate dividends are two complementary tools, and it's actually not a problem at all. So if we take the second line of this figure that you have before your eyes, and we take an example, if your company and you produce, so you need investors, as I said, to launch your activity. And thanks to that money, you can produce your solution, so the heat pump, for example, and you sell it to the brick producer. That enables you to make money and to avoid emission. That's okay. But if instead of selling directly your heat pump, for a reason or another, you're selling carbon credits, and thanks to the sale of the carbon credits, you can do your activity and have your impact. You can still say, okay, I made that much money and I had that impact. But this is something that you can claim at the level of the company, because ultimately a carbon credit is just it's a tangible asset that you can sell. It's a marketing strategy. Instead of selling directly my heat pump, I sell a carbon credit. Why not? But that doesn't change anything, which is that you stop at the company level saying, I made that much money and I sold that and I had that impact. If you want to circle it back to your shareholders, to the people that made equity, you've got nothing. And this is where the climate dividends come. So you can typically sell carbon credits and distribute financial climate dividends to your shareholders. It's the same impact assessment, but it's two different information. And even in the weird case, because it really doesn't happen, where the investor would be the guy who buys your carbon credits, which honestly is really not fair for the investor, because it means they need to give you money in equity plus buy your carbon credits to actually be able to say that what they support has an impact. So they have to pay almost twice. But let's say they do it for some reason. Even in that case, because they can't use climate dividends to offset, they're not going to reduce it twice, so their carbon footprint. So there's no cheating or no double counting for greenwashing or anything. So even in that case, it's not a problem. So this is just saying how it's very complementary in terms of mechanism. And there's one last thing that's quite important on that point, is that the scope of eligibility of projects that can come into carbon credit and on climate dividends is quite different. For a carbon credit, you need to prove what's called a financial additionality. So that means that you struggle financially to deliver your impact, that without the carbon credits, you wouldn't be able to do so. And which is good, because some activities like, I don't know, forest reforestation or mangrove preservation, they're not really meant to be profitable, and that's okay. Climate dividends are just looking at activities that are beneficial for climate, no matter whether they struggle financially or not. Accenta has a positive value, a positive contribution for climate. I believe that they should be valued for that positive. The Climate Dividends Association believes that they should be valued more for that positive climate contribution, no matter whether they struggle financially or not, but just because this is an additional value that they're bringing. And so the scope of project that is eligible for climate dividends is way wider than this is for carbon credit. That was quite a long explanation, but I think hopefully useful. Thomas, do let me know if it wasn't clear or if your question was completely different. And if other people have questions on Solar Impulse, to Jérémy or to Antoine, on what they did more concretely, of course, also don't hesitate to go in the chat directly. Yeah? I think
there is a few questions in the Q&A section. If you look at it, so you already answered for the carbon credits, but there was one question on ISO, on data storage.
Okay, thank you, Antoine, for moderating that session for us. So the climate dividend is not an ISO standard now. To be completely honest on this, at the very beginning of climate dividends, so in early 2023, we discussed with ISO on the potential of making a standard. We decided that it was too soon because the ISO standard is a very, very formalized and not very entrepreneurial approach. And that we also wanted to have something that could evolve with the usage of our users, both investors and companies, so that we would first more have a sort of private, not in the sense of private sector, but in the sense of not ISO development. And so far, we're keeping this. Might evolve in the future, but so there's not yet. I'm looking now, Robin, to the other questions. You have tools, methods to help benchmark, quantify for things like data storage. So we don't have anything specific for data storage. I don't know, Robin, if you do, but very open to discussions. When we don't have something yet, what we do is that we discuss with you and see whether this is something that we could also help you build. So don't hesitate to reach out. Actually, if Thibaut, you're still here, you can put the email. I mean, Robin, we can also share our email, but we can very happy to discuss things if it's necessary. Robin, I don't know.
On the solar impulse side, we don't have such a tool as well. We have this tool that we use for the purpose of the label, but that is quite generic and not towards the things such as data storage. So same answer, but happy to same as Laura was saying, happy to get in touch about this.
So how does climate dividends take into account solutions that have a slightly greater impact on the carbon? Okay, well, that's a very good question. And I think makes a lot of sense with that collaboration. Climate dividends is really focused on the carbon, the impact of decarbonization and not on other environmental impact. But that doesn't mean that we believe that there's only climate in life and in impact reporting. And so the mandate of the association is a bit larger. Tomorrow we'll love to look at maybe biodiversity dividends or things like this. And this is also why a collaboration with something like Solar Impulse makes a lot of sense, because on climate we're very precise, but we know that there's other things that need to be looked at. And that can be addressed, for example, by the Solar Impulse label. I don't know if, Jeremy, I see you nodding if you want to intervene like this. What we feel is that when you want to measure something, you need to be quite precise. So we don't want to be a green dividend, because this is just open bar for greenwashing. However, the overall approach led by either a company or an investor should be broader and can integrate climate dividends and other things like Solar Impulse label. I don't know, Jeremy, you want to maybe...
Just quickly to say that impact funds have been attempting to measure and assess those positive impacts that are not related to just carbon, and maybe try to assess with different KPIs that are specific to a company's solutions, what's their impact on health and biodiversity. And these measures are being invented, bettered over time. There is nothing yet in terms of the level of standard and credibility and the integration into the financial valuation that goes as far for other topics than climate dividend has done for the past couple of years on climate. But you have lots of initiatives. Astanor is one of the funds that is working with an impact valuation hub, trying to see how we can evaluate impact on all the metrics, all the topics, and integrate that into financial valuation. So different initiatives, everyone is working to try to do that. I think the industry started with carbon first because it's one of the most pressing issues. Even though if you look at the 9 planetary boundaries, you should just look at the 9 of them and not just like climate. And also because there's been measurement in that field for maybe 20 years. The carbon footprint has had time to better itself in terms of methodology for quite a long time. And the other topics are not as mature in terms of measurement. So probably why they're a bit behind. Which doesn't mean that investors are not trying to assess that impact, measure that impact, and also invest in solutions in nature tech or other fields.
There's one last question on the Solar Impulse questionnaire. Maybe very quickly, Robin, maybe you can...
Yeah. There's a question. Would you please help these 2 questions? So is there any one-on-one discussion with Solar Impulse team to help answer the Solar Impulse Foundation questionnaire? Yes, there is. We have a dedicated team on the application process. I will follow up with you, Andre, on this and give you the contact of this team. They will help you answer the questions, go through the questionnaire, and yeah, build the application. And second question is Solar Impulse Foundation relevant to software as a service startups? Most of the questions on the questionnaire are about hardware, equipment, carbon footprint. So yes, indeed, the Solar Impulse Foundation is very relevant to software as a service startups. The reason why we have a lot of questions on the questionnaire about hardware equipment is that on the questionnaire, we try to be as broad as possible to be able to tackle the different cases. And it's true that usually hardware equipment, they tend to have a lot more impact on the production and distribution side, while software as a service is something that is hard to quantify on this. But usually the way we go with these software as a service companies is to do what we call a bill of material and to understand what are the requirements to put in place the software. And here we're talking mainly about energy. Where do you store the data? What is the energy embedded to put the software in place? And then we try to also understand the impact of the software and its use case. So we can also use this questionnaire, fine-tune this questionnaire, and adapt the questions and the answers to make sure that we can fit with your model.
I think the time has run out, maybe. And I don't know if we've answered all the questions, but feel free to reach out to either any of us so we can put the email of Climate Dividends, or Thibaut or one of our team members put the qualification form if you want to get more info and see. I'm sure you, Robin, can also share if you want to have more info on this. And it was a pleasure. I don't know, maybe Antoine, would you have the word of the end, or Robin, do you want to do it?
Maybe we can leave Antoine.
As a user, no, really, for those convinced that climate is really a topic we should work on, this is, I think, today the two most meaningful initiatives to report non-financially your avoided emission and your positive contribution to the climate change. So, and they are nice people, so do not hesitate to contact them.
Thanks a lot, Antoine.
Yeah. And thank you all for attending this session. This session has been recorded, so if you need a record of it, we'll be happy to send it over. And don't hesitate to reach out if you have any question. It was a pleasure to have you today.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.